The wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. The church was filled with friends and family, their laughter echoing in the grand hall. The groom, dressed in a crisp black tuxedo, stood nervously at the altar, his heart racing with excitement and anticipation. The aisle was decorated with delicate flowers, the air buzzing with love and hope, but something felt off. The whispers started softly at first, spreading like wildfire through the crowd. The bride was nowhere to be seen. Seconds turned to minutes, and the minutes stretched into an unbearable eternity. Every eye in the room turned toward the groom, who stood frozen in place, his smile fading as realization dawned. "She's not coming," someone whispered, the words slicing through the silence like a blade. Humiliation washed over him as he stood alone at the altar, the weight of 1,000 stares pressing down on him. His world crumbled in an instant, the promises of forever reduced to a painful memory. But what no one in that room knew was that this moment wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning. Years later, he would return, not as the heartbroken man they remembered, but as someone entirely unrecognizable. The groom who was left at the altar had transformed his pain into power, and his revenge would leave everyone speechless. She left him heartbroken in front of everyone, but what he did years later shocked the world. Daniel was the kind of man people gravitated toward. At 28 years old, he had a warm smile, a steady job as an architect, and an unshakable belief in love. His friends often teased him for being a hopeless romantic, but Daniel didn't mind. He believed in grand gestures, handwritten letters, and the kind of love that could weather any storm. His dreams weren't extravagant, just a happy life filled with love, family, and the simple joys of a well-lived life. His fiancée, Emily, seemed to be the perfect match. She was strikingly beautiful, with sparkling blue eyes and an infectious laugh that could light up any room. Emily was confident and ambitious, working as a marketing executive in a top firm. To everyone around them, Daniel and Emily were a power couple, the epitome of a modern-day fairy tale. They had met at a mutual friend's party, where Daniel was immediately captivated by her charm. Over the years, their love story unfolded like a dream, filled with romantic getaways, thoughtful surprises, and promises of forever. But while Daniel's love for Emily was unwavering, cracks had begun to form beneath the surface of their relationship. Emily had always been drawn to the spotlight, thriving on attention and validation. While Daniel cherished quiet evenings and heartfelt moments, Emily often sought excitement and thrill. Despite their differences, Daniel dismissed his doubts, choosing to believe that love could bridge any gap. As their wedding day approached, the world around them buzzed with excitement. Friends and family couldn't stop gushing about how perfect they were together. "They're made for each other," people would say, smiling as they imagined the picture-perfect couple exchanging vows. But what no one saw, what even Daniel chose to ignore, were the fleeting moments of hesitation in Emily's eyes. There was the time she had brushed off wedding planning with an "I'll get to it later," or the way she seemed distant during their engagement photo shoot. Daniel chalked it up to pre-wedding jitters, telling himself that every couple had their moments. What he didn't know was that Emily's doubts ran deeper than cold feet. Emily had been harboring fears about commitment, and whether the life Daniel dreamed of was the one she truly wanted. To her, the idea of settling down felt like a cage, confining her ambitions and the freedom she valued so dearly. But she didn't share these fears with Daniel, not wanting to shatter the perfect image everyone had of them. The love story that seemed flawless on the outside was slowly unraveling from within. As the wedding day drew closer, the tension between dreams and reality grew stronger, setting the stage for the heartbreak no one saw coming. The morning of the wedding was a scene straight out of a fairy tale. The church stood tall against the bright blue sky, its stained glass windows glowing in the sunlight. Inside, rows of chairs were adorned with white ribbons and fresh flowers. Guests arrived dressed in their finest, their laughter filling the air with excitement and joy. Daniel stood in a private room, adjusting his tie in front of the mirror. His best man, Mark, clapped him on the back with a grin. "Nervous?" Mark asked. Daniel chuckled, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "A little," he admitted, "but I can't wait to see Emily walk down that aisle." The ceremony was set to begin, and the guests were seated, their eyes eagerly fixed on the grand double doors at the back of the church. The music started, signaling the bride's entrance. Daniel's heart raced with anticipation, but as the seconds ticked by, the doors remained closed. The murmurs began softly, spreading through the crowd like ripples in water. Mark leaned in toward Daniel, whispering, "I'll check what's going on." Daniel nodded, his hands clenching nervously as he waited. The minutes stretched unbearably, each one heavier than the last. The priest cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. Mark returned, his face pale. He avoided Daniel's eyes as he whispered, "She's gone." The words felt like a thunderclap. "What do you mean, she's gone?" Daniel asked, his voice cracking. Mark hesitated before replying, "She left. There's no explanation. She just left." The weight of the words hit Daniel like a tidal wave. He turned toward the crowd, seeing the confusion and pity in their eyes. His chest tightened, and the room seemed to spin around him. Someone in the audience whispered loudly, "Did she really just leave him at the altar?" The words echoed in Daniel's mind, amplifying his humiliation. He stood frozen at the altar, his dreams shattering piece by piece. Emily was gone, and with her, the future he had envisioned so clearly. The hours that followed were a blur of pain and disbelief. Daniel sat in the now empty church, staring at the scattered petals on the aisle. Guests had offered their condolences before leaving, their words hollow and unable to penetrate the fog of his heartbreak. At home, Daniel replayed the events over and over in his mind, searching for answers that weren't there. He stared at the unopened wedding gifts stacked in the corner, a cruel reminder of what could have been. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages and missed calls, but he couldn't bring himself to respond. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel sank deeper into despair. The humiliation of being left at the altar haunted him. Friends tried to comfort him, but their words felt empty. "She didn't deserve you," they said, but it did little to ease the ache in his chest. One night, as he sat alone in the dark, a thought began to take shape in his mind. "I can't let this define me," he whispered to himself. The pain was still raw, but beneath it, a spark of resolve began to grow. He wouldn't let Emily's betrayal be the end of his story. The days of despair began to fade as Daniel resolved to take control of his life. It started with small steps, getting out of bed, taking long walks, and finding solace in quiet moments. One morning, he stood in front of the mirror and made a promise to himself. "I will not let this define me." Daniel threw himself into self-improvement. He joined a gym, channeling his anger and frustration into physical activity. Each day, he pushed himself harder, his body transforming along with his mindset. The mirror that once reflected a broken man now showed someone stronger, both inside and out. But physical change wasn't enough. Daniel began attending seminars on personal growth, learning about resilience and the power of mindset. He devoured books on entrepreneurship and leadership, his nights spent poring over pages that spoke of triumph over adversity. He also rediscovered his love for design. Sketching had always been a passion of his, but it had taken a back seat during his relationship. Now, it became his therapy. His sketches evolved into intricate architectural designs, sparking a dream he hadn't dared to pursue before. Months turned into years, and Daniel's hard work began to pay off. His designs caught the attention of a prominent architecture firm, landing him a position that skyrocketed his career. His innovative approach and dedication made him a rising star in the industry. Awards and accolades followed, but it wasn't the success that drove him. It was the sense of self-worth he had regained. Daniel's personal transformation mirrored his professional one. The man who once doubted his every move now stood confidently at the forefront of his field. Invitations to high-profile events flooded in, and Daniel began to network with people who recognized his brilliance and shared his vision. At one such event, a thought began to form in Daniel's mind. As he looked around the room filled with people who once seemed unattainable, an idea took root. A plan, subtle yet powerful. He didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. He wanted closure, a moment to reclaim his dignity and show the world how far he had come. The plan wasn't immediate, nor was it clear in its entirety, but Daniel's mind worked quietly, weaving possibilities. He began building connections, forming alliances that would serve him in ways others wouldn't understand. His sketches became more ambitious, his projects more daring, and his name more influential. One evening, as he stood in his now spacious office overlooking the city, Daniel sketched an idea that wasn't just for a building, it was for an event, one that would change everything. A faint smile crossed his face as he imagined the moment he would reclaim his narrative. "Not yet," he murmured to himself, "but soon." Years passed, and Daniel's transformation was nothing short of extraordinary. No longer the heartbroken groom left at the altar. He was now a celebrated architect known for his innovative designs and philanthropic endeavors. His name had become synonymous with brilliance, and his success stories were often featured in magazines and newspapers. To celebrate the grand opening of his latest project, a luxurious hotel in the heart of the city, Daniel planned an extravagant event. Invitations were sent to elite figures, celebrities, and influential personalities. Unknown to her, Emily, now working as a marketing executive for one of the sponsors, received an invitation too. The night of the event was a spectacle. The hotel's grand ballroom glittered with opulent chandeliers, soft music filled the air, and the scent of fresh roses added a touch of elegance. Guests arrived in their finest attire, mingling and marveling at the breathtaking architecture. Daniel, dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, moved through the crowd with ease, his confidence radiating. As the evening unfolded, Emily arrived, unaware that the man behind the event was the very person she had abandoned years ago. She walked into the ballroom, her eyes scanning the lavish surroundings, impressed by the sophistication of it all. Daniel's moment had arrived. He stepped onto the stage, the crowd's chatter fading as they turned their attention to him. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice calm yet commanding. "This project is a testament to resilience, creativity, and the belief that even the deepest wounds can lead to the greatest transformations." As he spoke, his eyes found Emily in the crowd. She froze, recognition dawning on her face. The confident, composed man on stage was a far cry from the heartbroken groom she had left behind. The color drained from her cheeks as Daniel continued. "This hotel isn't just a building," he said. "It's a symbol of rising above the ashes, of proving to yourself that the person you were isn't the person you have to remain." His words, though directed at the audience, struck Emily with the force of a hurricane. The presentation ended with a video montage of Daniel's journey, his struggles, his victories, and his transformation. The crowd erupted into applause, standing in awe of his accomplishments. Emily, however, couldn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, each image a reminder of the man she had underestimated. After the presentation, Emily hesitantly approached Daniel. Her usual confidence was replaced with a mix of guilt and admiration. "Daniel," she began, her voice trembling, "I had no idea. This is incredible." Daniel looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Emily," he said, his tone polite but distant, "I'm glad you're here to see this." "I made a mistake," she blurted out, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't see who you truly were. I was selfish, and I've regretted it every day." Daniel paused, his gaze steady. "You're right," he said, his voice firm. "You didn't see me then? But that's okay, because now I see myself." Emily's tears spilled over, but Daniel offered no solace. Instead, he walked away, his head held high, leaving her standing alone in the glittering ballroom, surrounded by the echoes of a life she could have been part of, but had chosen to leave behind. The grand event had reached its zenith, and the air in the ballroom was thick with anticipation. The moment Daniel had planned for years was now unfolding. Emily stood before him, her once confident demeanor replaced by hesitation and regret. The man she had left broken and humiliated was now unrecognizable, strong, composed, and commanding the respect of everyone in the room. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice trembling, "I've thought about that day every single moment since it happened. I was wrong to leave you like that. I was selfish, and I didn't understand the depth of what we had. You didn't deserve what I did to you." He looked at her, his expression calm but unreadable. The room seemed to fade into the background as the two of them stood face to face, the weight of their shared history pressing down on them. "You're right," Daniel replied, his voice steady. "I didn't deserve that, but maybe it needed to happen. Maybe I needed to see that the person I thought you were wasn't the person you are." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I've changed, Daniel. I see things differently now. If I could take it all back, I would. Please, is there any chance we could start over?" Daniel paused, the room holding its breath. He took a deep breath and shook his head gently. "No, Emily. The man I've become, the life I've built, has no room for someone who didn't see my worth when it mattered most. I'm grateful for the lesson you taught me, but this is where we part ways." Emily's tears spilled over as she whispered, "I'm sorry." "I know," Daniel said simply, his tone firm but not unkind. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone amidst the glittering grandeur of the ballroom. The crowd, unaware of their exchange, continued to celebrate his success. But for Daniel, the real victory was reclaiming his dignity and proving to himself that he was always enough. In the days following the grand event, Daniel's life settled into a rhythm of purpose and peace. The ballroom confrontation, though emotionally charged, had lifted a weight he didn't know he was still carrying. For years he had allowed that moment of rejection to define him. Now it was just a chapter in a story of triumph. His days were filled with the work he loved, creating architectural masterpieces that would stand as monuments to resilience and creativity. His evenings were spent mentoring young architects, passing on the lessons he had learned through hardship and determination. Daniel had become a figure of inspiration, not just for his professional achievements, but for his personal journey. Occasionally he would hear whispers of Emily's life, how she had left her job and moved to a quieter town. He felt no bitterness, only a quiet acceptance that their paths had diverged for a reason. One evening, as Daniel stood on the balcony of his penthouse watching the city lights twinkle below, he reflected on how far he had come. The man who had been left at the altar was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, wiser, and at peace with himself. Revenge isn't always about getting even, Daniel thought. Sometimes it's about finding your own strength. Let this story remind us that our greatest setbacks can lead to our greatest growth. Strength isn't in what happens to us, but in how we rise above it. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible tales of resilience and transformation. Share your thoughts below. What's a moment in your life that helped you find your strength?